This is the WDGR podcast with Drew and Will and your guest, Dave, who just accidentally walked into the dog gate dividing this room from the living room, knocked it over, and tore a bunch of paint off the wall in the process, then had to struggle to get my girlfriend to turn off Fortnite so that I could properly connect and deliver this podcast. Hopefully, this audio sample is acceptable.
Hey everybody, welcome to Will and Drew's Gaming Retrospective. You're listening to episode 87 for the week of July 26, 2020. I'm your host, Drew. I'm joined by Will. What's up, man?
Not too much, man. What's going on with you?
You know, we have been trying to record this episode for an hour now.
Yes.
And we are having like nonstop technical issues, so I'm just going to like blame our guest.
Oh boy. Poor Dave.
Fuck y'all.
That's my line. Insulting my health.
Welcome, epic outro to the podcast today. Dave, how's it going, man?
Oh, it's going good now that we kind of have our technical issues sorted out.
We have you making your phone call through us to Discord using your phone. And nobody that's listening to this episode will ever know that because we are also recording a high-quality local version.
Yes.
Because we're nothing if not prepared.
We're prepared. Prepared but not professional.
With foil hats on.
There you go.
In brighter news, though, Dave, I don't know if you realize this, but you are now the number one frequent guest on this podcast. This marks your third appearance with us.
Ah.
Well, that is awesome. I enjoy every time I come on the show. It's totally a pleasure. I love listening to the show, and it's awesome to be on the show. So thank you for having me.
Of course,
absolutely. Man. It's a pleasure to have you here, and I'm super excited about our topic today.
Me too.
Yeah,
We're going to be talking about it's going to be great, man. We're going to be talking about The Last of Us 2 and do a deep dive into that. And yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. Real quick, everybody check us out on the web at WDGRPodcast.com. Hit us up on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at WDGRPodcast. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on Spotify, all that shit. Will, how can they find you?
SoundCloud at Will_Gear.
And Dave, you have any social media you'd like to share?
I am epic_outro on Twitter, but I do not really use it.
Boo.
I would love to. I can't think of anything to say.
Neither can I.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody can.
Well, it's kind of a dumpster fire. Like every time I go on Twitter, I feel like I'm screaming into a void.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But I'll try for the sake of you guys. I'll try and be more active on Twitter.
You don't have to do that.
Thank you.
Well, that was short-lived. Sounded so sincere, too.
So, we're going to be talking about The Last of Us 2. We're going to be going deep into this game. There are going to be spoilers everywhere. This will be the only warning. So if you are listening to this episode and you have not played the game yet, or you don't want to be spoiled, recommend that you come back to this another time. We apologize if you're here for generalizations. It's not going to happen. This is a huge game, and there's a lot to dissect, and we want to do it with the gloves off.
Yep. Well said.
So let's start with you, Will. You started this game.
I did.
And then you chose to stop, and kind of wanted to see if you'd be willing to open up about that a little bit.
Of course. Yeah, pretty interesting experience. Interesting is putting it lightly. I would say it was more disturbing for me, which is kind of a first. So my history with, sort of just violent video games is pretty long. Never really had an issue with them, but there was one game in particular, Manhunt, that I played many, many moons ago when I was, probably 18, 19 years old. And I remember having some issues with that for obvious reasons. When you're putting bags over people's heads and stuff like that, it tends to be a little bit gruesome. But with Last of Us 2, I enjoyed it for the most part. And I only played probably, 3 hours, just under 4, I believe. And as the game progressed, I just felt really kind of disturbed with the content and what the game sort of forces you to do. And I think a lot of that is because the game is really good, and it's extremely realistic from a graphical perspective as well as sound design and really everything. So what they did with 2, in my opinion, is they've obviously ramped up the realism with, just choking somebody out or, sneaking up behind a runner and stabbing them with Ellie's little shiv or knife that she has and just kind of ripping it out of their throat and seeing blood kind of spray. And you see and hear everything in this game. And I think I knew that going in, but when I would have sessions of playing the game for, say, an hour to 2 hours plus, it just became more and more disturbing for me, where it would just kind of increase my anxiety levels, and I felt uncomfortable, and I thought, you know what, this is probably normal because what I'm experiencing is disturbing content. But it just had an effect on me that was way greater than I think anything else I've experienced in other violent games, and I think a lot of it is just due to the fact that, naturally I'm kind of an anxious dude, especially if I'm put under a situation like that. And I have like weird OCD about stuff too. So like if I find something disturbing, it may stay with me longer than it would for your like average person that doesn't have OCD. So for example, if I had to do something that like crawling into like a ventilation shaft that had blood stains everywhere, and that kind of stuff might haunt me for like the rest of the day, or it might give me like a weird nightmare. And I was actually getting nightmares, not every night, but maybe like once a week, and I'd be like chased by runners and stuff. And I was like, this is normal. I've just got done playing the game and I played till 10:30 and then I went to bed at 11. So it makes sense. But it had such a profound effect that it caused me to discuss with you and other people about potentially stopping the experience. And I had to think hard about it because I thought, you know what, give it more of a chance. These things are normal. And then when I spoke to other people, I found like they weren't really having the same issue. So I reached out to the internet, did some research to see if anybody else was having similar issues. And I found a few articles where people spoke about their time with it and how they felt like it was overly violent. And it made me feel better about ending my experience with it. And I didn't really want to because I wanted to see where the story went. But I think ultimately it wasn't worth sort of prolonging that anxiety and the sort of disturbing feelings I would get from playing the game. And it just wasn't worth it. It wasn't making me feel comfortable. And it's interesting because, like I said, that's never happened to me before in any game.
Wow.
That's pretty heavy, man.
Yeah, I realize the older that I've got, I feel like my tolerance for violence has, I guess gone down. I used to watch movies like Event Horizon and Cube and The Shining and all those kind of like really creepy movies, and it wouldn't bug me. But as every year that would go by and I'd watch stuff like that occasionally, I just grew more, I think just sort of emotionally affected by it, where like it would just kind of stick with me. I remember this movie, Only God Forgives, with Ryan Gosling. I actually enjoyed the movie. But there's some pretty disturbing stuff in that. And I think that when something is depicted in a very real way, it can stay with people. Not everybody, but for people like me. There was actually another movie, I can't remember what it's called now. It's done by Nicholas Winding Refn, who directed Only God Forgives and Drive. And I saw that movie in the theater. I think it was The Demon something. Can't remember it now. That movie highly, highly disturbed me. I remember I went alone and I left, and I was really, really creeped out for like a couple days, just because the way that he shoots the film, it's so real. Like you actually, it's like Hacksaw Ridge. I had the same problem with that movie. I saw Lauren. We were basically cringing the whole time because Mel Gibson, as we all know, is an incredible director, and he has a great sense of realism with his movies. And my tolerance for that is just, it's different. It mentally affects me more. And, you know, I had a really tough bout with real anxiety and panic attacks when my father died in 2009. And, you know, I still deal with that to this day. So I have to be careful with the content that I absorb, because I have one of those brains and sort of minds that really retains it and gets almost kind of obsessive about it. So I can't watch like, you know, back-to-back horror films. Like if somebody invited me over to watch like do one of those like horror nights, I'm out. Right. You won't see me there. And, you know, I might be at this point in my life a little bit more honest about it too, because I have nothing to hide. It's the way that I am, and my life outside of the podcast and work is very zen. I mean, you know that's true. Like I have Himalayan salt lamps. I have oil diffusers. I try to meditate. I have a didgeridoo. I do yoga. I try to relax a lot because, you know, there's that underlying anxiety that I had when my father died that I have to kind of keep at bay. So,
right.
You know, that's really kind of the gist of it.
I mean, you know, mental health is a very serious thing.
Yeah.
You know,
you don't want to toy with it.
And it's something that I think we take for granted in this country, specifically, you know, in the United States. I think a lot of people tend to downplay it or ignore it. And, you know, it's starting to become a little bit more recognized, but it's very serious, and it can affect every aspect of your life if you're off balance, you know. Like I can personally vouch for like that kind of level of anxiety when I was playing Doom Eternal at some points. You know, when I started playing that game, we were just starting to really ramp up with the coronavirus in this part of the country. And I was not in a good place, and that game was not helping. And, you know, I needed to kind of put it aside for a while. And, you know, I was able to get back to it. But, you know, it was, it took me a couple weeks before I felt comfortable doing so.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's dark material, and we are living in kind of dark times. I mean, they're a little bit better. There's light at the end of the tunnel. But yes, when you were playing Doom Eternal, I remember, you know, a rough time at work and COVID. And when you kind of combine all those things and then you sit down, you play an incredibly maddening game where even though it's very violent and you're ripping up like, you know, demons and stuff, so it's a little bit, quote unquote, healthier, I guess. It's still something stressful. And what's interesting about mental health is sometimes you don't realize that there are things that you do in your life that affect that, and you might think that they don't, but they actually do. And they do it from a subconscious level. So that's why I had to end my time with The Last of Us 2. And I don't regret it, but I do wish that the game was not as violent as it was, because I feel like I would have stuck with it, or I would have stayed with it, because Last of Us 1, I felt like it was a better experience from a violence perspective, because it was there. And there were some disturbing moments, but it was nowhere near as bad as it was for me with The Last of Us 2.
Well, I think you probably checked out of the experience at a good time, because it only gets worse from there.
Yeah, and that's what everybody kept telling me, and I was like, man, this is just making my time with it even worse. And I was getting like anxiety knowing that I like had to play it. Like if I knew, okay, I got nothing going on tonight, let me sit down with Last of Us 2, I would get like this weird like bubbling anxiety knowing that it was going to be like traumatic for me to load it up. And it was most of the time, especially, well, I don't want to say it now, but there's some things that happened in the game that we'll speak about, of course, on this episode that were really just tough to watch.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you know, our original plan for both games were to kind of simultaneously play them and then kind of do a review wrap up. And we did that with the first game. And, you know, when you said you were checking out with the second one, I was a little disappointed, I admit, but I totally understand why, you know, and I don't blame you. If it, like, there was a conversation I was having with somebody in the retrospectives Discord room, and they were talking about how this game and the first game were essentially, quote, torture porn. And they were describing it as just being very violent and, you know, I'm trying to remember the words that they used, but the words torture porn stick out to me right now. And I defended the first game. I had just finished the first game. This one hadn't come out yet, or I hadn't gotten that far into it yet. And I was like, hold on. It's not torture porn. It's a depressing story, but it's very heavy. Yes, it's violent, but it's telling this beautiful tale of these two people who develop this father-daughter relationship almost begrudgingly, but they need each other more than they realize,
Mm-hmm.
And I think I kind of made my point in a way where the person kind of turned around a little bit, maybe not a full 180, but I think they were kind of seeing my point. And then when I finished this game, I kept thinking about that conversation over and over again and how they were essentially right in a lot of ways, because this game is so heavy and so violent and just dark, and it forces you constantly into situations that make you feel uncomfortable.
Precisely.
Over and over again. And it like Dave said, it doesn't let up. It doesn't get better. It only gets worse.
Correct. I mean, I didn't play much, but the first game had a similar effect that I know we spoke about on our review episode, where you feel kind of mentally exhausted coming away from the game because the subject matter is so heavy.
Definitely makes you feel something, though.
Yes, it does. You become attached to the characters.
Like as I'm sure we'll touch upon, the second game really deals with themes of vengeance, and I feel that it really makes you realize the cost of pursuing vengeance. Certainly not just as your main characters, but also as the gamer, because seeing these awful things happen to characters that you grow to care about, like there was a point where I just wanted that cycle to end, just because I was tired of seeing, so many great characters. I mean, not great from a moral standpoint, but just really well-developed, well-acted characters, having awful things happen to them for the sake of revenge. And so if they were trying to make a commentary on that, they really succeeded, I feel.
And the thing is with this game too, it's like this cycle, like, it's this constant battle of revenge between Ellie and Abby. They're always like one-upping each other, it seems. And, it's difficult to watch because like you start to feel for these other points of view. You start to feel for these characters. You understand where they're coming from, and then something horrible happens to them, and then they repeat the cycle and they get their revenge, and you start to like hate them again. And, it's like this back and forth that, I don't know. It's tough, man. It's really tough.
It really is. I mean, it is incredible, but it is a really costly incredible.
Yeah. And like, from my perspective, there's a strong possibility that this will wind up being, my game of the year for 2020. Right. Because I had such an amazing experience with it that made me feel things that most movies don't make me feel. Most stories, most TV shows don't make me feel. This is a very, very powerful game. But there is a price to pay for that. So we should start getting into it, man. Will, I'm going to hand the reins over to you, I think, and let you kind of lead the charge here.
Sure. Yeah, let me just get my my notes in order here. We usually have a cadence to this kind of thing. So why don't we do this? For topics of discussion, why don't we start with story? Let's talk about what's taking place in The Last of Us 2. How does it open up? How does it start?
Well, let's see here, Dave.
Yeah.
What were you... Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I mean, it's a very long game, so I'm trying to think back to where it all began. But I think there's like maybe the briefest sense of a recap. I think you see a couple of moments from the previous game at some point in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
You do. And then they kind of throw you into Abby's shoes pretty quickly, don't they?
They do, if I remember correctly. I think Abby was really the character that they used to kind of explain the gameplay mechanics to you, and but also very quickly on, you get to see the new world that Ellie's inhabiting, and was it called Jackson, that like town that they were in.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And so you kind of get to see how life has progressed in the years since the first Last of Us. And you definitely get a sense that, things have kind of settled down. Everyone has kind of found their place in this community that they've built. And it almost seems like things are kind of stable for a little while,
mm-hmm.
which is why there's this kind of impending shadow of dread in the opening of the game, where you know that that's not going to last.
What did you think about being forced to play as this new character right from the get-go?
I didn't have a problem with it. Like, I know it's a new game. They're going to be introducing some new folks. And I was kind of just fully invested to go along for that ride. So, I didn't mind them doing that, because I felt it kind of expanded the cast beyond, the folks we got to know in the first game. So I was cool with it.
I mean, for me, I kept myself in the dark with this game kind of leading up to it, and I know the spoilers got leaked pretty early on. I had no knowledge of any of that stuff. So I had no idea that there was another character being introduced to play as. So when they threw this Abby character at me, I'm like, who the fuck is this? I don't want to play as her.
Yeah, I had that feeling too.
That attitude persisted with me throughout the entire game, unfortunately. And as the game progressed, I think it grew stronger and stronger.
Well, I think the thing is, right from the get-go, early on, if you pick up on the little hints in Abby's conversation with her friends, you could kind of gather pretty quickly that she is going she's going to bring a lot of conflict to that world that they've established. And just hearing those little bits of conversation where they were talking about why they were going to Jackson, it kind of built up that sense of dread, and it made me not trust her.
So, what were your expectations, from her?
Well,
at that point,
I avoided spoilers, but I just had a certain gut feeling that a particular event was going to happen, which ultimately came to pass. And it became clear to me very early on that Abby was going to be the one who made that event happen.
Which event is that, Dave? Just rip the Band-Aid off,
Just
man.
rip the Band-Aid off? Okay, we're talking about where Abby went full-on Negan on Joel's skull with a golf club while Ellie watched.
That was tough.
Yeah.
That was real tough.
At that moment, I don't remember ever feeling such anger towards a video game character as I felt towards Abby when that happened.
Oh, for sure. Well, I think too, during that sequence, before it even happens, you're thinking what most people think when you see something like that about to potentially take place. You think, oh, there's no way he'll die. There's no way he'll die because, the good guys always win or whatever. And the fact that he really does die like that with that golf club was a serious gut punch.
Mm-hmm. I didn't want to believe that that was real and that was how they were going to leave it. I thought that there was going to be some opening for maybe he could recover from that, or maybe he didn't really die. Mm-hmm. But it became clear that, very, very quickly that they were committing to that storyline, for better or worse.
And with the first game, you had some pretty prominent characters die, but nothing of that level. They just punched you right in the gut, right away.
Mm-hmm.
They were just the gloves are off, and this is going to be a different experience. And, it just, it really caught me off guard. Like you, I kind of felt like there was going to be some sort of an opening where he would come back from it, and then to watch them actually kill him off like that is just very painful, very, very frustrating, very disappointing, because for all of Joel's flaws, I really came to like him, and we talked about him being a very selfish character, not really the best person, the kind of guy who does what he needs to do to get by and to live and to kind of make things in this world work for him. And, that kind of came back and bit him in the ass in ways that we don't really comprehend until later in the story.
Yeah, I mean, I loved Joel in that first game. I thought he was even though he was morally very, very damaged, I just loved seeing that first game through his point of view. And I really, even though the things he did were awful, I can honestly not say that I don't understand where he was coming from, and the motivations, for why he did the things he did.
Of course.
But it just sucks to see in The Last of Us 2 that he has to pay the price for that.
Will, any thoughts on the death of Joel?
Yeah, just from the beginning of the game, obviously he's talking to his brother Tommy, and he's kind of cleaning his guitar and telling him like everything that happened between him and Ellie, and it really sets the tone. And when you kind of start with, riding down, this beautiful landscape, I think it's in Colorado, with Tommy in the beginning, you think, okay, maybe I'll play Joel for a while, or maybe if I don't, he's going to stick around. And even in the trailers, they show Joel a lot, and it looks like he's going to be part of the game. And, when he died like that, like I said, I wasn't expecting it to happen because I thought there's no way they're going to kill him, at least not yet. And when they did, I was just I remember just like I kind of put my hand up to my mouth, like kind of when you see something kind of gruesome. And I was like, you got to be kidding me, man. There's no way he's going to die. And sure enough, when you find out that, he really does, I was just really, really disappointed, because I really like Joel. Just as a character, I became attached to him, just like, probably any person that's played the first game. And whether he had moral issues or what, or morality issues or what, I still felt like he was extremely likable, and you knew that there was a protection that he had for Ellie, and that sort of father-daughter relationship that he was trying to create for himself. So I wasn't happy about it. I mean, I understand that they have to do that, and they wanted to do it for a gut punch, quite literally. But yeah, it's pretty sad.
Yeah.
And, in the first game, Joel, he really brought a certain perspective to the game, and a big personality. And suddenly not only was the character dead, but that perspective and that personality was gone. And I was worried that the game wouldn't be able to like fill that gap. But I think over time, it kicked and scratched its way into doing just that.
Which character you think exemplified that the best?
Honestly, I think it was kind of the fact that we got to see a lot of different characters with a lot of personality and a lot of very real relationships. Because I think one of the biggest strengths with the first Last of Us was the relationship between Ellie and Joel that you got to see develop throughout the game. And in this one, while there was nothing quite like that, you did get to see glimpses of relationships between like Abby and Owen, and of course between Ellie and Dina. So I think it was kind of shocking that suddenly we're dealing with new characters and there's no more Joel. But I think with time, and this game definitely gave you the time to get to know them, I felt that they did kind of fill that space.
Well, I mean, you had Abby and Lev, which I think was very much a mirror of what was going on with Joel and Ellie.
Very true.
I saw a lot of shades of that, and you had Abby, who was very reluctant. We're jumping all over with the story, so apologies. But later on, and while you're playing as Abby in the game, she comes across Yara and Lev. They're two Seraphites who are, forced to flee from their settlement because they're being punished. You don't find out why quite right away. But Abby kind of works with them as a mutual benefit because, they help her escape. She helps them escape. They all escape together. And then there's an injury. So now Abby feels like she owes Yara and she owes Lev. And she goes on this journey to, get her to a place where she can get help. And then she has to go get supplies. And in this process, she starts to learn about Lev and what Lev is running from, and who Lev is. Lev was born a woman, and she's really a boy, so that's sacrilege to the Seraphites, and they try to kill her or him, and he runs. He flees that. So Abby now has this protective element, that didn't exist before.
Mm-hmm. I guess we could back it up to kind of like...
Yeah, kind of gone far ahead.
Yeah. So basically, after the head bashing of Joel, we very quickly jump back into Ellie's shoes. Probably, I'd have to imagine either a few days or a few weeks later after, they've kind of had a time to heal from that attack, and Joel has been buried. And they're kind of trying to figure out, Ellie's trying to figure out what the next step is, and she has one goal in mind, Drew, and that is...
Kill Abby.
Oh, yeah. And I got to be honest, like at the beginning of the game, like I was totally on board. I was like, I'm going to kill the ever living shit out of Abby because she killed my fucking favorite character from this franchise. Mm-hmm. And I had a gut feeling, even though it was still very early in the game, I had a feeling that Naughty Dog was going to try and eventually make me kind of empathize with her. But I was very resistant. I was like, all right, I dare you to make me feel that way, because all I felt at the beginning, just like Ellie, was murderous hatred. And that's pretty much what propelled her to go on the quest that takes up the entirety or most of the second game.
Well, before we go further, I'm curious as to, kind of how you guys felt about exploring Joel's house after he died, because I thought that was a really kind of tough bit to get through.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's I think the sort of thing that, all children kind of dread the thought of, experiencing, going through your loved one's belongings and kind of discovering what you haven't seen in years or what you remembered, from your childhood or whatever. It's kind of that same experience, seeing his watch. And I think there was a scene where Ellie smelled his jacket, if I recall.
Yes.
I thought one of the one detail that really stuck out to me during that section was that there's a shelf, and there's two photos on the shelf next to each other, and one is Joel with Ellie, and the other is Joel with Sarah, his biological daughter. And
I did see that.
It's his two daughters there.
It's a good way to put it. And it's kind of interesting because, Joel was so resistant to Ellie being his quote unquote daughter at first, but
that is what made that first game so incredible, was just the evolution of that bond.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's few games that achieve that. And then fucking Abby.
That's what makes it so much more frustrating that, Joel gets killed so early on and so brutally. And that's what lends to that revenge that, you and I were so on board for. Throughout the entire game, I just wanted Abby dead.
Yeah, you did a really good job of that.
And there were moments where I didn't, and we'll get into that, but
dude, it's
overwhelmingly, it's just
just hearing Will introduce a section of a game where you're going through the house of a deceased loved one. It's this is not the feel-good game of the year, folks. It is 40 miles of dark road, as they say.
Well, that's just it. Is I guess it does kind of depend on your sort of perception of things and your emotional connection with the game, because I'm sure there are plenty of players, and this isn't really a disrespect to how other people play games, but I'm sure there are other players that are a little bit more casual about things, and when they went back to his house, they were just like, all right, where's the loot? Let me just get in, let me get out. For me, it was very much I was walking slowly through there, and I went in the bathroom, and you could see your reflection in the mirror, and I could have sworn, and maybe it was just my own personal feelings, but you could actually see emotion in Ellie's face in the mirror.
You could.
And I was like, wow, she actually looks sad. And I wouldn't put it past Naughty Dog that they specifically changed her facial animation to be different when the game senses that you're in the house. Because they go that far.
Intentional. That was intentional.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's numerous times throughout the game where, you know, the characters' expressions change depending on where they are and what they're doing.
Yes.
You know, it's not just a one-size-fits-all kind of approach. And those details make a huge difference, you know?
Oh, yeah. It is shocking.
Yeah, and I remember... I just remember when Dina was calling for me when I was upstairs looking at one of those little... it was like a horse carving. It was like a cowboy on like a horse. It was made out of wood. And I was looking at it, and I was really taking my time exploring the place. And I heard her saying, like, Ellie, come downstairs or whatever. And it was like one of those moments like where you don't want to come down. You're like, in a minute, you know? And I had that happen when I was exploring the house because I felt so sad, and you really felt like there was something missing there.
So eventually, you know, Ellie finds out that Tommy has taken off and gone hunting, and he went without her. So Ellie teams up with Dina, and I don't think Jesse comes out right away, does he, Dave?
If I'm not mistaken, I think he kind of... No, he popped up later. He didn't go with them. He popped up and kind of saved the day at one point later.
Right. When they're kind of pinned down by, I think was it the Seraphites?
No,
I don't remember
wolves?
if the Seraphites or WLF.
Yeah, WLF.
It was the wolves? Okay. Right, because that's right, because they ended up in that truck.
Yes.
But anyway, so the two of them, Dina and Ellie, grab a couple horses, and they have a lead. They start following Tommy, and they're trying to catch up with him in Seattle. And this is one of my favorite parts of the game, because the way the two of them interact with each other is wonderful. Like, it's just this casual conversation as they're kind of walking around the city on their horses, occasionally dealing with some runners, occasionally some clickers, and going through all these different stores trying to look for clues. They have a map that they're going with. It's just one of my favorite moments, I think, in video game history.
Wow.
Happens in Seattle when they're in a music store and Ellie finds a guitar and she sits down with it and she plays a song for Dina. She plays Take On Me by Aha. That's one of my favorite songs ever. And to hear that rendition of it on an acoustic guitar was just amazing. It was a beautiful version of the song. And in that context with, you know, Ellie, who's in love with Dina, that whole thing just was perfect.
I heard good things about that sequence. Obviously, I didn't make it that far, but I heard some of those moments where you can kind of strum the guitar with the touchpad were pretty special.
And that moment, I think anyone who is still under the illusion that video games cannot be incredibly powerful, that moment, to me, proves them all wrong.
Agreed, 100%. You know, just as a side note on that guitar thing, you know, I thought that was a cute kind of way to add some interactivity into the game. And there's some people doing some crazy shit with it, too. Like, if you go on YouTube, you can find people doing covers of songs, just strumming them on that touchpad.
Really?
It's pretty wild, yeah. There's a whole community of people that are just doing songs that way.
That's really cool.
But I mean, as far as like, you know, as far as it being part of the game, it was clever, it was neat, but it was kind of unnecessary, in my opinion. I don't think it really did anything but be cool. You know?
That's fair. Sometimes there's just coolness.
And that, like, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I'm not saying I wish it wasn't there, but if it wasn't, I wouldn't have missed it.
I think it's one of those moments that you needed as a break from just the constant onslaught of horrifying violence.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
And definitely for anyone who thinks that Ellie is just a totally violent figure, you know, it's moments like that definitely remind us of her humanity.
Mm-hmm. I could agree there because, I mean, I think a lot of her innocence is lost, right? I mean, she had a lot more of it in part one for obvious reasons. She was younger and was not exposed to that level of survival per se. And in part two, it's obviously that's all it's all gone. Like there's no issue taking out a clicker with a knife, you know.
Now during this this part of the game too, while you're playing as Ellie, there's periodically flashbacks to time that she spent with Joel. And there's a couple things that like really stuck out to me. I think the one that, you know, really hit me the hardest was when it was Ellie's birthday and they go swimming and then they go to the museum. Did you experience that part, Will? Or was that after you stopped?
Swimming and going to a museum?
Yeah.
That didn't happen.
So there's a clever like nod to the original game and how Ellie couldn't swim.
Oh, really?
And they kind of just like surmount that like fairly quickly. And
I would have enjoyed that.
And then they end up at a museum and Ellie's looking at all these dinosaurs and making all these wisecracks at Joel about how he's old. And it all culminates in her and Joel going into a NASA space capsule from the 1960s.
Oh, and wow.
She's putting on this helmet and he finds a tape for her, like a cassette tape with like the actual launch broadcast from NASA's Mission Control. And she puts it on and she's listening to it while she's in this space capsule. And it's like, I'm getting chills just talking about it, man.
That sounds really cool.
That is another one of those moments, just like the Take On Me part, where it just transcends being just a violent game and it becomes something that's very real. That was an incredible part, and it really reminded me of the Left Behind DLC from the first game, where she found that arcade cabinet and she kind of had to close her eyes and imagine she was actually playing it.
I love that sequence.
Very, very similar to that. I'm glad you mentioned that, because it's very much the same kind of spirit.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Ellie's closing her eyes. She's got the smile on her face, and you know she's just sitting in the capsule with Joel. You know, but they're upside down. You know, because they're sitting, you know, the way the capsule would launch. And then, you know, as she's hearing these sounds, like you start to see lights on her face, like she's actually launching into space, and you know, it kind of is like this next level of that experience. Mm-hmm. And you know, very artistic the way it's presented, but you know, it shows how much their relationship has grown since the previous game.
And there's a part during that scene where Ellie is like closing her eyes and listening to the cassette, where it shows Joel just kind of like just smiling as he watches her, and you could tell, you know, how much he cared for her.
Yeah, I mean, he you know, is absolutely, you know, he loves her, you know, like he loves his own daughter.
Absolutely.
Powerful.
Though to just kind of go on an offshoot for a minute, like you, Drew, I avoided spoilers for this game, but before I played it, I was scrolling through YouTube and I saw a video about The Last of Us, and totally out of context, the thumbnail for the video was a picture of Ellie in the spacesuit in the ship with like with the lights on her face. And I'm like, oh my gosh, tell me she's not going to fucking go into space.
Oh.
But
well, you dodged that
luckily,
bullet.
Yeah.
Thank God.
Well, I mean, there's always The Last of Us 3, so.
Yeah, you never know.
On Mars.
So what next stood out to you? You know, we don't have to hit every single plot point, obviously. There's so many to hit, but, you know.
Well, I'll say I really loved that at one point in the game, Ellie and Dina kind of found this abandoned theater that became their home base for a while. Mm-hmm. And I really liked that whole that area and the atmosphere of it, and how it was kind of like a hub for a little while that the gameplay parts kind of launched from.
That theater reminded me, last summer I was doing some audio work at a theater in New Britain, and it reminded me of that theater in all kinds of ways. So it was a very comforting feeling for me being in there.
Sounds like there were quite a few of these kind of moments away from violence, which is refreshing to hear about.
Well, those moments are like this counterbalance, because you have like this beautiful narrative, and then you have this violent horror, and it's this constant tug of war between the two.
Very much so. I feel like both games, you have this sense of you're never safe for too long, and it's kind of like that moment where Ellie and Dina find that old like sort of pot plant, where they go down there, they spark up a joint that was found in a little mason jar, and even though they're having a good time and they end up making love and everything, you kind of think, okay, well, this won't last long because any minute now something's going to happen. You're going to hear a clicker. There's going to be a runner situation, which reminds me, actually, do you guys remember that sequence with Abby and the runners like chasing after her? And they were like all bashing the fence and everything. She's squeezing through the fence. I think it's towards the beginning of the game. It's a huge sequence. That was fucking terrifing.
This is before she kills Joel, right?
I believe so, yeah.
Or leading up to it, yeah, because she was with Joel and Tommy.
Yes, that's exactly.
And Joel and Tommy saved her ass, by the way. So she was very ungrateful with that golf club.
Well, I think that's what made it worse, is like the whole lead up to the death. Like you think that she's innocent, potentially. She gets her life saved in a huge way. And, even fucking Joel and Tommy are like introducing themselves, and you're like, all right, like, maybe they can team up. And
I disagree, man. As soon as Joel introduced himself, I knew that moment was the kiss of death. Like, as soon as he said his name, I'm like, she's going to know him from somewhere, and that's why she's here.
That's fair. That's fair to say.
So let's talk about Abby. What is her story? What are her motives for killing Joel?
Well, basically, if you've played the first game, near the end, Joel brings Ellie to a Firefly compound where there's a surgeon who can save the world, get rid of this horrible cordyceps outbreak. But in order to do that, Ellie has to die in the process of this operation. And Joel makes the decision that he's not going to allow that to happen. So he storms into this hospital, guns blazing, and he saves Ellie, but in the process, he murders that surgeon. And it turns out that surgeon, Drew,
it's Abby's father.
Mm-hmm. And that is where the cycle of vengeance begins.
Not only is he Abby's father, but apparently he is the only person left alive that is capable of developing a cure. He is like the leading epidemiologist. He's basically Dr. Fauci.
Oh, okay. Now, not to segue too much here, but who is this gentleman who is close with Abby, the sort of young Abercrombie and Fitch looking model type dude with the like orangish hair, and like he seems like that guy that's like really creepy.
Owen is former lover of Abby's.
Okay.
They had a relationship together. It's questionable whether either one of them actually moved on, but Owen kind of distanced himself from Abby due to Abby's quest for revenge. And Owen ends up falling in love with another person with the WLF, and she ends up pregnant. And the two of them were planning on kind of going off and starting, a life together away from the WLF, the Wolves, as they're called. But Owen and Abby still have feelings for each other, which are kind of, unresolved.
He isn't really creepy. He kind of makes a turn and attempts to become a better person at one point in the game, and it has utterly disastrous results.
He's kind of like Abby's moral compass, where like Ellie's is Dina.
And in both cases, vengeance fucks that right up.
So we find out that, Abby's father is this epidemiologist. He bites it. He's dead. Abby goes for her revenge. She gets her revenge on Joel. And then she leaves Tommy. She leaves Ellie. She's like, all right, I got what I came for. I'm done. Right. Mm-hmm. And then, we start to see the world through Ellie's eyes. Ellie starts her quest for revenge. Abby, as far as she's concerned, that's it. It's over. We're even. Right.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that, Dave? And
go ahead. I'm seeing like an interesting parallel where, we were just talking about how at the end of The Last of Us 1, Joel saves Ellie, he kills that doctor, and that was the end of the story. So I kind of see that moment where Abby kills Joel maybe as kind of being what she thought was the end of her like story.
Right.
And just like what happened with Ellie, where after the first Last of Us, she moved on and tried to have her life only to have it shattered by Abby. Now Abby is going to face that same thing happening when Ellie decides that she needs revenge for Joel.
It's this constant like tit for tat with these two. Mm-hmm. They're constantly like trying to one up each other. And I would say ostensibly, Abby ends up kind of with like the worst end of the stick here.
Okay.
But, because, Ellie ends up killing Owen. Ellie ends up killing Mel. Nora. Tommy kills Manny. Right? So by the end of the game, the only people that Abby has left is Lev.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody else is gone.
Wow.
Now, on the flip side, Ellie's lost everybody for a different reason. Jesse dies, right, at Abby's hands. Abby kills Jesse. She, violently maims Tommy, but he lives. He's not going to walk straight ever again, but he lives. But he leaves, and he is nowhere to be seen at the end of the game. And Dina takes off at the end of the game too. So this quest for revenge has kind of bitten them both in different ways. Ellie's like her friends and family are still alive, but they're not in her life anymore.
And the problem is, like, when you get to the midpoint of the game where Ellie and Abby have their confrontation, and for all intents and purposes, Abby pretty much wins. Like, she beats the living shit out of Ellie, and she's literally like 2 seconds away from murdering pregnant Dina. Only to have like Lev chime in, which gets her to relent, and she allows Ellie and Dina to live, and they try to go back to their life on this farm. But even after all that, even after losing Jesse, even after Tommy being maimed, Ellie still can't let go and still wants revenge. And it costs her.
What does it cost her?
It costs her relationship with Dina. It costs her the child that they were raising together. And Dina told her, she says, if you go seeking this vengeance again, I will not be here when you get back. And that is very true. When Ellie, at the end of the game, when Ellie returns to that farmhouse, it is empty.
That was heartbreaking.
It really was.
There wasn't even like a note for her. It was just an empty house. Everything was gone except for the contents of her room.
That sounds pretty sad.
It was heartbreaking. And there's a few reasons for that. First of all, to kind of jump ahead to the final scene here, there's this big blowout fight between Ellie, who, just can't let go of this vengeance, and Abby, who ends up being captured by another faction of humans called the Rattlers, and they basically string her up on a pole and leave her to die. So by the time Ellie finds her, she's been hanging on this pole for days. She's malnourished. She's weak. She's no longer this, huge buff woman that we saw throughout the show. The game. This strong fighter, this warrior. She's now like she can barely stand up.
And I don't know if you noticed, they also cut off her ponytail.
They did, yeah.
This is Ellie.
This is
Abby.
Both of them had short hair at this point, but this is Abby.
Okay.
So they have this drag out fight at the end, and it's like this epic battle, and like I've personally felt like I'm being forced to like choose sides at this point. Now, throughout the entire game, like I wanted nothing to do with Abby, but like seeing her like that, like I was like, all right, let's just go. Like, just get out of here. And then like the game like forces you to like beat the shit out of her. And in the process,
and before you jump to that, like Abby doesn't want to fight at this point. She just wants to move on. But
she just wants
Ellie,
to go.
She just wants to take Lev, who's unconscious at this point, and get to safety. Ellie forces her to fight by putting a knife to Lev's throat. Mm-hmm. So Ellie really has pretty much lost any sense of innocence at this point.
And humanity.
Yeah.
Well, Abby takes her fingers, at least, so that's a plus, I suppose, right?
Yeah, like, what is it, like Abby bit her fingers off?
Yeah, her pinky and her ring finger on her left hand.
Oh, Jesus.
She bites him off in this fight, because Abby's fighting dirty.
Clearly. So this is I'm guessing there's just a final fight sort of showdown here at the end?
Yeah, it's like this final confrontation, like, this Rattler village is burning to the ground, on fire. They managed to get to this Ellie gets to like these docks where a boat should be for her, and there's 2 boats left. She takes Abby down, and it looks like she's going to let her go, and then she like throws down and she's like, no, I'm not done with you yet. And the 2 of them have this fight. And you're playing as Abby, and you're viciously attacking. Or I'm sorry, you're playing as Ellie, and you're viciously attacking Abby, and the game is forcing you to have this showdown as Ellie. Like you're not able to choose which character you're playing as. And I kind of had an issue with this, not because like I didn't want Abby to win, or I didn't want Ellie to win, but like this game felt to me like Abby's story for more than half of the game. Like you spend a lot of time playing as Abby, and then they throw you back in Ellie's shoes, and now you're back on the hunt again. And it's not like, I don't know. I'm having trouble kind of putting it into words.
Like there's even a part during the confrontation, the earlier confrontation between Abby and Ellie, where you're playing as Abby in this cat and mouse sequence where Ellie is trying to kill you, and she's using all the tools that you got used to using when you were playing as Ellie, but now you're fighting against that, and Ellie really was quite scary in that sequence.
Yeah, I feel like somebody told me this. Was it one of you guys?
Well, I think there's a mailbag question related to it.
Oh, yeah, maybe that's where I read it.
Yeah, because I know Joe had mentioned it in his comments.
Yeah, that's what it was. He was saying that it was kind of terrifying when you were being hunted by Ellie.
What else do you want to hit on, Dave?
Well,
we're
Drew,
kind of jumping around.
Yeah, I think you were trying to go in this direction earlier when we were talking about when Ellie returns to the farmhouse and it's empty and there's no note, there's no Dina, their kid isn't there. And because of her confrontation with Abby and losing her fingers, there's one more consequence.
Oh, yeah, she's unable to play the guitar.
And, as I mentioned earlier, I thought that guitar kind of represented her humanity in a way throughout the game. And I don't know if they were trying to convey, a sense that was no longer there.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Or I like those kind of details. I'm sure there's a lot of backstory with that.
I could see how that could be a good analogy, because like every time there was like a downbeat and she was kind of like rediscovering her humanity or her love for somebody or just trying to kind of like rediscover her, way of dealing with loss of Joel and all these other people. That guitar was always a source of comfort for her. And then, she picks it up for that one last time and she tries to play it and, she's only got 2 fingers working and the song sounds broken because she's not able to make these chords.
I feel like it's no different than a unfortunate homeless person that gets their guitar smashed by like a group of hooligans, and that's his only pride and joy. It's his only sense of joy because that's all he has left. He has a backpack and a guitar, and Ellie's very much, in that sort of vagabond position.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an apt comparison, but like that homeless person could potentially end up with another guitar someday. Ellie will never have those fingers back.
Yeah. I suppose I'm sugarcoating it, but it's
Could you?
Yeah, that's pretty tragic. I had no idea. I mean, obviously, I would have no idea, but that really sucks.
Yeah.
Could she learn to play with the other hand?
I would say so, but it's that would be a challenge. But yes, I mean, there's no reason why she wouldn't be able to, start over and try to relearn. But I don't think that's what they were trying to, go down
no,
road
of
with.
course.
Like they were trying to essentially show her closing a door to her past, I think, and trying to move on. I mean, we've kind of like glossed over a few parts in the middle, that we missed. You do spend quite a bit of time playing as Abby. You explore the WLF and their headquarters in Seattle, which ends up being this massive football stadium. It's like this very well organized city, basically. The game forces you to walk through every single part of it, and it is long and annoying, and I didn't like it. Any thoughts on that, Dave?
All I can think about is the burrito eating sequence.
I must hear this.
It's not really much to it. Like, at some point, for some reason, Abby eats a burrito, but then, like, I guess in photo mode, because the game has a very extensive photo mode, like, someone somewhere did, like, a whole photo shoot of the burrito sequence from all these different angles.
Oh, Jesus.
So Joe shared some of those photos in our Last of Us 2 chat.
That's odd. I mean, it's odd just to even think about Abby eating, because just because, like, or really anybody eating in any video game, because I feel like it's like one of those things that just doesn't happen.
Well, dude, she needs those.
Abby is so.
She needs that. She needs that protein to keep that muscle on, man.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, she's got a weird thing going on, but yeah, she's so inhuman that it's hard to imagine her doing a simple human activity such as eating a burrito.
I'll tell you though, this is the part from the stadium that really got me. It was actually, one of the most emotional parts is because the part where you're playing as Abby takes place a little bit before most of the stuff you're doing with Ellie.
Right.
So when you're in the stadium, you meet this friendly dog named Bear, and you can pet the dog. You can throw the ball and play catch with Bear. And all I could think of during the whole time that Abby was having this, this lovely time with the dog Bear, is that when I played as Ellie, I brutally killed that dog.
Oof.
Not because I wanted to, but because I felt at the time that I had no choice.
So I've heard that there are ways around murdering the dogs in the game. Unfortunately, I found out about them after I murdered all the dogs.
Yeah, me too, man. I found out I didn't have to fucking destroy Bear. I could have just left him to his own devices, but you know what? I didn't know that. I didn't know that Bear was a good boy, that he fetches balls. I just knew he was trying to kill me.
Right.
So.
Yeah, if you shoot the owner of the dog, or the caretaker of the dog, and kill them without the dog seeing you do it, the dog will just kind of stay there and then just kind of wander around.
Interesting.
I wish I knew that, because that was the one part I was most conflicted about. I wish I had like a save I could load, because I hated having to hurt
and
that
like
dog.
the thing is like the way the dogs operated in the game, like they can sniff out your scent and follow your trail, and they became like more complicated to kill than the humans. So like I hate saying this, but I made it my mission to kill them first, because if I didn't, like, I was going to get eaten.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like Naughty Dog did such a good job in both games, just creating that sense of, a lack of choice, but sometimes when you do have a little bit of choice, you still have to make a tough one.
Mm-hmm.
And they do a really, really good job. And I know later on in the game, you guys would know obviously better than me that there are some things that that you end up kind of, or you're sort of forced to do them, and they're pretty uncomfortable to do so.
Oh, yeah.
Are there any... go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, I read about this one sequence where I guess you have to beat the crap out of somebody to get, like, information. That's all I really know, but do you guys remember that at all?
Absolutely. I believe that was Nora, right?
Yeah. I mean, Ellie, like, beats the shit out of Nora, and it's implied that you kill her, but as you find out later, that was just the beginning. Like,
and the problem
she doesn't kill her. She tortures her off camera, too.
Yeah. And the thing is, that moment, and she's doing this because Nora knows where Abby has gone, and Ellie wants to find Abby, of course. But, once you corner Nora and she's refusing to give you the information, it basically, it gives you control of Ellie, and she has, I forget what the weapon is, but she has like the equivalent of a baseball bat, and she pulls the baseball bat back, and suddenly like a button that you can press appears on screen. And she's not gonna do anything until you press that button. And I know I did not want to press that button. I wish they had another choice, but it is inevitable that you're gonna have to do it.
And the thing is too, like, while you're not pressing the button, Nora is coughing and spitting and crying in pain.
Jesus.
And it just goes on until you press the button. And then you have to press the button again. And then you have to press the button again. And the noises that Nora makes get worse and worse and worse. So, like, you could press the button once and it sounds bad, and you can just kind of let it sit there. And Ellie's just holding that bat, and she looks like she's kind of like torturing her. It's like fucking like Reservoir Dogs kind of shit, you know?
Jesus. Yeah, that's exactly what I read about. The guy was kind of speaking on that point and how difficult it was, and he felt like he had no choice.
Well, you don't.
Right.
You don't. There is no choice. That's where you're going with the game.
Well, he said something along the lines of, like, I tried to just not do anything, just to kind of see what would happen, and nothing happens. Like, you have to follow through with it.
Right. It makes it very, very difficult at points, you know? It's like, I want Ellie to get her revenge, but not at the cost of, so many people. And, you don't really realize it at first, but, like, the WLF are not all that different from the Fireflies. I mean, most of them are former Fireflies, and a lot of them are not much different than the people of Jackson. They're just people that are trying to survive in their own way, and they have a strong military presence in the area, but their main foes are the Seraphites. Those people are fucked up. I find the Seraphites absolutely terrifying, Dave. They whistle to communicate.
Yeah, it totally reminded me of the season finale of Walking Dead season 6 when Negan's group is trying to corral Rick and his friends. They did that whistling to communicate with each other.
Yep.
I was definitely getting vibes of that. That whistling also annoyed the shit out of me after a while.
It does, but I'm going to take this to another level.
Uh-oh.
My neighbor whistles like that.
Oh, no.
Oh, Jesus. Oh, Jesus.
And he does it, like, for no reason. Like, it's just like, if he's working in the yard, he'll just whistle. He'll whistle in between, like, yelling at his family. He'll whistle when he's driving down the street. He just whistles. And it's like that loud kind of like same kind of whistle. So now I have the perspective of this game, and every time I hear him whistle, my head's like, huh, am I being hunted?
Well, yeah. Maybe he's identifying enemies in the area.
I guess so.
He might be protecting you.
I'm sure he's not. but thank you for the optimism.
I love how you said he whistles in between arguments.
Well, because he's like, that whole house is just a fucking disaster.
Oh, it's that one, isn't it?
Yeah.
I know which one.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. Dave, remember when we were filming Kodiak Killer, I said to you, I hope my neighbor doesn't come out.
I do.
Well, that was the neighbor, because we would have heard him whistling on camera. Anyway.
So why don't we do this, Drew? I have a question, actually, for you guys regarding the story, and I think it might be a good way to wrap it up and move on to some of the other topics. What is the general consensus and the kind of closing statement with not only just the story, but this idea of playing two different characters?
Every time the perspective shifted, there was a little bit of a loss of momentum because I felt that the game kind of got to a really climatic moment each time before that shift occurred. But, once you got into it and you kind of, understood the character and their separate skill set, I was totally on board because it just meant to me that the game was going to be, a really long, meaty experience. And I was totally on board with that. So I like the fact that we got to, experience these different perspectives and that they went on for like so ridiculously long as they did. So for me, I enjoyed it.
I have a different take on that. I agree with you on the loss of momentum. But I think for me, like I felt, if you didn't notice, like through my recalling of the story, like, I definitely felt for Abby and what she went through. And, I struggled at points with Ellie, trying to, force her to stop attacking Abby or stop hunting this vengeance, just following this vengeance path that she was on. And obviously you can't, you're essentially on rails with this game. The thing is like when I bought this game, I was under the pretense that this is a story about Ellie. And I felt like for the most part, it was really a story about Abby. Now, Ellie does have a story and it's very profound and it bookends the entire game. You are following her path at the beginning and at the end, but the middle is so much about Abby and her story. And I wasn't expecting that. It really caught me off guard because in everything that I had read about the game, which admittedly was very little, there was no mention of Abby. And like I intentionally did that. I didn't want to know about the game, but I guess I wasn't prepared for that either. Like I expected to just be more fun times with Abby or with Ellie and Joel, like I was looking forward to that experience. And
there's no fun times in this game.
There was no fun times in this game. And I was very resistant to playing as Abby almost the entire time. Every time I was forced to play as her, I just like, all right, well, I'm done with this bitch. Let me get back to Ellie. I care about Ellie. I don't care about Abby. I care about Ellie. I want to see what happens with her. I want her to get her revenge. It wasn't until I think the very end of the game where I truly started to sympathize with Abby when Ellie was fighting her when she was broken, So I don't know. Like, I feel like there's a better way to handle this, for my taste, because the game felt like it was excessively long at points. And although I enjoyed it and like I don't regret playing through it, I felt like it was going to end multiple times.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And, I don't want to dive into that too much because I know there were kind of questions on the topic from the mailbag. But, I want to kind of flesh that out a little bit more detail when we get there.
There's one plot point that we didn't really touch on where you're playing as Ellie, and this is before the game is shifted to Abby's perspective, where Ellie kind of invades this aquarium where Abby and her friends had been for a while. And she encounters Owen and Owen's pregnant girlfriend. And Ellie is trying to get them to tell her where Abby is. And, of course, it totally goes to shit. And in the process, Ellie ends up killing both of them, only to realize after the fact that one of them was actually pregnant.
Yeah, that was pretty heavy.
Yeah.
And when she did, like, I think she reacted appropriately. I think, Tommy came to her aid at that point, and, Ellie was violently ill at what she had done.
Yeah.
So that was a rough moment for sure.
And I'll tell you, when I was playing as Abby, you repeatedly return to that aquarium. And every time she returned, I was like getting anxious. I'm like, is this the time she's going to find her dead friends?
Right.
And, each time, no, the game continued.
That's one thing that bothered me. Like, I really felt like they could have kind of like put things a little bit on fast forward. Like, where this is going. Let's just get there. And I felt like some of this shit was drawn out unnecessarily.
But, it does, now, as I'm thinking about it, it does, like, I do remember one part where Owen's girlfriend, is her name Mel?
Yes, Mel.
Okay. There's a part where Mel is at the aquarium during Abby's section, and she's talking to Abby. And she basically flat out tells Abby that she's a horrible person.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end, well, not the end, but at the point where Abby has beaten Ellie and she has the knife to Dina's throat and she's about to kill Dina. And I think Ellie tells her, like, don't do it. Dina's pregnant. And Abby's like, good. And she's about to murder her.
Right.
And that's when Lev, interrupts and stops her. And I think that was the moment where she changed and chose not to be a horrible person.
Interesting. Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, man, this game is fucking deep.
It is. I mean, we can go on, about all these little moments for another 2 hours.
It's a lot to absorb. I'm learning quite a bit just from hearing you guys kind of go back and forth.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much in this story that, to unpack, all these moments where, not even just Ellie and Abby, but like even Tommy, a character like Manny, who, ends up like, he's like basically Abby's roommate and best friend. And, the two of them are essentially hunting partners, when they're out trying to, defend their home turf, right?
And he's a genuinely likable dude in that game.
Super likable, right? He's a side character, super likable. You really dig him. And then there's a section where Abby is I don't remember where she's coming from, but she encounters him, and he's trying to defend himself from a sniper who's taken out the rest of the group that he's with. And there's this whole section where they're running, through these cars trying to get to this sniper, and they make it all the way up to the top of the bridge. They get all the way up there, and then the sniper shoots him right in the head. And you see him die right in front of you. Guess who the sniper is? It's Tommy.
Oh, jeez.
So now Abby has a reason to kill Tommy. And it's like this cycle of revenge, these two, it's, these stories are so intertwined. It's yeah.
And I'm going to go on a quick deviation about Tommy, which I know I've spoken to you about this, Drew. But in the beginning of the game, when Joel has been killed and his brother Tommy decides that he's going to go and track down Abby and kill her, his main concern, though, is making sure that Ellie doesn't follow him. He doesn't want her involved. He wants to keep her protected. He even makes arrangements to have her like locked up in Jackson so that she can't come along.
Right.
But after he fails to kill Abby and he's been maimed by her and he can no longer walk properly. I think he even loses an eye, possibly. And of course,
yeah.
And you find out that not only that, but his wife has left him. And, he really, he's lost pretty much everything he had left after Joel died. And then at that point in the game, he actually totally does a 180 and wants Ellie to go get that revenge because he can no longer do it. It's almost as if, that is the only thing he has left to live for. And it causes, it basically erodes him as a character and just makes him what he was not.
Right. Yeah, he's like just kind of regressed into, that's all he's got, is just seeking revenge for his long lost brother and everything else that he's lost.
Yeah. Vengeance sucks, folks. Don't go for vengeance.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, this is powerful stuff.
Yeah.
Just sit down, have a conversation,
Work it out.
Work it out. Yeah.
Work it out.
Oh gosh.
Sorry we went on a 20-minute tangent there, Will.
No, it's all right. I mean, I'm learning, like I said, how profoundly heavy this game really is. I mean, I thought that the first 3 hours were, but this is that was just a warm-up.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's so many moving parts with this game, and you really don't even realize how intertwined everything is until the very end, And it's kind of crazy, too, because, like, when you're playing as Ellie at the end of the game, and you're still on the hunt for Abby, and you start coming across that city where Abby was in Santa Barbara, and like the way it plays out, so Abby and Lev are trying to find a long lost Firefly base, and what ends up happening is it tips off this other faction called the Rattlers, and the Rattlers come and they take possession of them and they essentially enslave them. But you don't see them getting taken away. You just see them surrounding Abby, getting ready to beat the shit out of her. And then all of a sudden it shifts over to Ellie, who's been following this lead, trying to get to Santa Barbara because she heard that there's a boat that Abby was on that landed there. So she goes up through all these, abandoned houses in Santa Barbara. She fights all these, different infected. And the entire time I'm seeing this, I'm thinking to myself, all right, this is the part where they join forces and become a superpower.
Yeah.
And then that was not the case because, apparently, Ellie got there a little too late, probably a couple weeks late, I would say, or if not longer. But, by the time Ellie is there, Abby is long since gone and at that camp. So then she starts going into, finding the camp and everything. And, I just felt like this entire time that I was like just hoping that the two of them were just going to kind of team up and like fuck everybody up and then just go their separate ways. Nope. Didn't happen.
Damn.
I don't know if that could have happened.
But I wanted it to. Doesn't mean, you know.
Yeah.
That's what. This whole game is a bunch of things that I wanted that didn't happen, though.
And, I don't want to keep delaying with tangents. So by all means, Drew, feel free to cut me off. But as much as we talk about the violence and as much as we talk about the, the human moments, there are also some legitimately scary moments in this game.
Like what?
The big one is descending into the heart of that abandoned hospital, which was ground zero for the infection 25 years ago.
Oh Jesus, that sounds terrifying.
Will, all I was thinking about that whole time was you, Will, because when I was playing that, it was late at night, and I was like, I don't know if I want to do this, man. And they basically, you're going down level by level, deeper and deeper into this hospital, and any moment, I'm fearing that some horrible enemy is going to pop out, but the game held them back, and it just used every layer you were descending just to build the tension. And to put you so on edge. And I got to say, when the big shit show finally happened in the basement of that hospital, it was fucking intense, my friend.
Oh, I can only imagine. All of those like hospital scenes, like especially in part 1 towards the end, really creepy, man, with just all the soldiers trying to find you and knowing what you had to do at the end, and just the idea of being in a hospital that's abandoned just haunts me.
Well, imagine the hospital that's abandoned that's also been sealed off for 25 years. Like nobody has been down there. No one.
Like, and I'll like I was down there in that hospital. I didn't want to fucking move, man.
Yeah.
It was so creepy.
Like there's like ambulance doors that are still shut, like pulled up to the building. Like there's rooms that are sealed. They have like all those like plastic tunnels, for like outbreak control and shit. And Oh, it's terrifying.
Man, that's tough.
And like then you have to turn the power on, and of course you know that no good can come from that.
No, never. Anytime you have to fire up a generator, there's always something bad that happens.
Uh-huh.
And then you go back into the room you were in, and you see one of those sealed ambulances that the doors have been like busted outward, and there's this trail of like blood and bloody handprints, but it's not just on the floor and walls; it's like on the ceiling and all over the place, just making you wonder what the fuck came out of there. And then at the worst moment, you find out that all the infected who were sealed in there 25 years ago basically just fused into one horrifying being that's just made up of all these like infected that are just like they're basically interwoven into each other's bodies.
It was like a giant flesh box.
A flesh box. Whoa.
Oh my goodness. That reaction. Holy crap.
That's a deep cut for Dave.
Oh yeah.
Well, on the topic of all this kind of stuff, I have another question. So tell me a little bit about some of the new enemies. Do we still have those bloaters, anything that's like super creepy like that?
Everything that's in the original game is still in this game.
Is it
new?
just me, Drew, or did they make the bloaters smaller this time?
I think they did because I think they needed to make the other boss, the one that you just talked about, so much bigger. The bloaters did feel smaller, yeah. But so we had that enemy that Dave was just talking about, and then there was what do they call them? Hunters? Was it?
Stalkers.
Stalkers, yes. They basically like kind of scurry around in the darkness, and when they're not moving, you can't detect them.
Mm-hmm.
And then they sneak up behind you and attack you, and those were like infuriating. Like
and the thing is,
they're best served like when you would like lay traps for them if you can.
Yeah, and if you shot them, they wouldn't continue to attack you. If you shot them, they would withdraw and like regroup.
Yeah.
So it like on the one hand, it gives you a moment to catch your breath, but on the other hand, they're still out there.
Right. So you're forced to press on to deal with them. Like you can't wait for them. You know how like the rest of the enemies, like you can kind of like create a distraction, draw them in, and then once they see you, they come at you. This is a completely different experience. They are constantly as far away from you as possible until they're ready to kill you.
Mm-hmm.
It's just frustrating and terrifying, and like I think I spent like an hour in that first area that I encountered them. There's like that office building.
Yep.
Like I was still trying to figure out like what their patterns were and what they do, and they don't have patterns. It's just retreat and then attack and then get the fuck out of there. Were there any others?
They had the Shamblers.
Which ones are the Shamblers?
I think they had poison gas or some shit, or liquid. I don't really remember, but I just know they made a point of calling them Shamblers.
I'm trying to remember which ones those were.
Yeah, because I feel like, during some of those development trailers and stuff, when they were kind of explaining what's new in the game, I could have sworn there was a lot of like new enemies.
Yeah, so the Shambler is like a bloater, but has like acid when they get close. Like they try to get close to you instead of throwing shit from you from a distance.
Joy.
Oh man.
We could delve more into the Seraphites if you like.
Yeah, let me hear about more of them. So they're this kind of religious cult, right?
Yeah, they're very much against the world that existed before the outbreak. They live on this island, and they pretty much have they've gone back to a very like rudimentary way of life where they just build like wooden buildings and lots of farming and hunting. The very, I guess, very religious, and they absolutely hate like anyone who lives outside of their cult, basically.
And as you're going through the game, you see a lot of references to like their religious icon painted on buildings. There's a box truck that somebody painted like her figure on, and there's all these like Post-it notes attached to it, basically, with like people like offering up prayers to that figure. But as you kind of go through the game, you encounter two Seraphites, Lev and Yara, who are fleeing the Seraphites. And at one point, Lev kind of goes into a little bit of detail and says that he doesn't feel that the Seraphites are really holding on to the original values anymore, that they've taken the original values of the religion and warped them.
Good thing that never happens in real life.
Oh, yeah. But like the first time you encounter them, you're in like kind of like a swamp-like area, and they're hunting you with bows and arrows, and they're flanking you, and the only thing that you could see is like torchlight, and hearing those fucking whistles. Oh man, I thought that was worse than the fucking infected.
And their means of killing their enemies once they catch you is to disembowel you.
Jesus.
Yeah.
So it's like the thought of knowing what they could do that makes them really creepy.
Mm-hmm. A good comparison, I think, is Walking Dead and Negan's group, but more religious, less rambunctious, I guess you could say.
Very, very fundamentalist. And one of the most exhilarating points of the game is when the WLF goes and totally fucks up their island and just like invades and sets that shit on fire. And there's parts where you're Abby and Lev like racing on horseback through this burning village, and it's just breathtaking. Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of like in Halo when you're on the Warthog at the end of the game running away from the explosions. Is that kind of vibe. You know, you're just barreling through on this horseback, trying to dodge all these burning buildings while there's like this huge fight breaking out. But like one part that I didn't really like, you end up as Abby at one point fighting your own people, and like they're like yelling at you by name, like as they're shooting you.
Mm-hmm.
So that was pretty wild too, because Abby defends Lev from Isaac, the WLF leader. She takes a stand up, and Isaac bites it. I don't remember who shot him, but
I remember who shot him. It was Yara.
Was it? Oh yeah, it was Yara. That was like her last act.
Mm-hmm.
Because she was in the process of dying, and she protected her brother one last time.
I'm surprised that.
Go ahead.
I'm surprised that like suddenly the game didn't change perspective, and now we're playing as a Seraphite who wants revenge.
Honestly, the entire time I was playing this game with Lev by my side, all I wanted to do was play as Lev. I want to know what his story is like. He tells it, but I want to play as him. And maybe that'll be DLC,
Maybe.
Yeah, you never know. Yeah, he was a cool character.
He was.
Except he made some really bad decisions with deciding to return to the Seraphite Island.
Yes. But, I mean, he was a child, too.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, well. He's one of the few people who made it out alive, so.
That's true.
Well, tell us about the music and the audio, sound design, and soundtrack.
Once again, Gustavo Santaolalla. Did I say it right this time?
We'll just go with it.
All right. Once again, amazing work. That, kind of dissonant, haunting guitar work and string work that we've come to expect from the game. I've never heard an acoustic guitar used so impactfully. And it's just a wonderful, depressing, like isolated, lonely soundtrack.
And the sound effects are also amazing. Like anytime you break a window, like that glass shattering was so explosive and fulfilling.
I always thought too, like I was very careful to, make sure there was nobody around when I broke that window, because I knew if there was, somebody was going to hear it. It was so loud.
Now,
yeah,
Did the Molotov cocktail still sound like a trumpet fart?
I don't recall that being the way they sounded. No.
Well, did you guys play with headphones?
I didn't.
I did for some of it, and I actually had to use the game's some of their accessibility features to really emphasize the closed captioning, so I can kind of better understand who is saying what. But I did play it with headphones.
Yeah,
do you feel like that added to the intensity, Dave?
It absolutely did. And definitely to get like, it definitely added to the immersion and to the fear factor. Like, when you have your ears sealed off and all you can hear is the sound of that game world, like there's no escaping it. So yeah, it definitely added to it.
There was something I was going to mention, and the accessibility options. Like, I didn't explore a lot of them, but this game has a tremendous amount of options that you can enable or disable to make the game easier or more difficult or just more accessible if you have like color blindness or any other handicaps. And I got to commend Naughty Dog for including those options. I think there's an option where, like, if you do like the Joel site, as we called it, it'll also ping, like, it'll ping where the enemies are, and I believe it continually pings them as long as they're alive, and it'll also show you like where objects are that you can collect or pick up.
You can, there was an option to, I believe, turn off like accidentally falling off of structures.
Oh, I didn't see that one. That's cool.
Now I don't know if this is accurate, but I've heard it said that it is possible to play this game if you're actually blind.
Now, it's funny you say that, because I was going to say that, they did do a tremendous job adding so many, make it very feature-rich in terms of the options. And I noticed that, of course, when you load the game for the first time, because it goes through all of those motions that a lot of games or high-quality games do now, where you can, adjust the framing of the game and the sound options. And there's so many sound options even just to choose from. Like, it'll ask you 3D audio or whatever, headphones, soundbar, whatever it is, and it's pretty cool that they went that far with all of those options and allowing you to tweak so much to have the best experience possible.
Yeah, it's very true. More games need to do that, in my opinion.
It's a very progressive game in many, many ways. And quite a bit of representation in the cast.
Well, why don't we pivot to the mailbag? What do you think, guys? I think we've pretty much hit all the major notes that we need to hit as far as the game itself goes.
This podcast is going to be as long as the game itself.
Oh boy. All right. Well,
take it away.
Sure. Before I dive in here, screw it. So we'll start with epic outro.
Hey, we know him.
Yeah. Some guy named Dave. So Dave says, apparently all Xbox Series X games will be compatible with last-gen consoles for the first couple of years. This is cool, but do you guys feel this will hold developers back from going all in on making these games truly next-gen? Are they really free to go all out with these games if they have to make them with older hardware in mind?
Dave, answer your own question first.
Yeah, right.
I don't know, man. I think all you got to do is look at any comment thread relating to the Halo Infinite unveiling, and you'll see a lot of criticism about the graphics. And I think a large part of that might be because that they're making this game to run on what will be the previous gen at the time. It doesn't really bother me personally, but clearly it's a tremendous issue for a lot of people. I do think it's cool that Microsoft, is going to be supporting the previous gen, but I don't think they're going to go all in on that. I think that is going to, I think at some point sooner than we expect, they are totally going to jump ship and go all in on next gen.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of curious. It seems like they're kind of taking a more PC approach with the Series X. And, PC games are infinitely backwards compatible as long as, you're not looking, I guess, at like necessarily DOS games or that are sped up, or I mean, there's ways to run pretty much every PC game ever made, but that's a little bit different just because the way a PC is designed, you can install programs that'll kind of pick up the slack here and there, whereas with the Xbox, you're not gonna have that freedom. But I don't know. I mean, I think there's something to it because that happened with Destiny. By having a game that was available on the Xbox One and the PS4, as well as the Xbox 360 and the PS3, Destiny had limitations, and eventually they had to stop pushing forward with those consoles and leave those consoles in the dust.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think my response to this is pretty simple. I just feel like it kind of touches on what we've spoken about so many times before. I want to see good games. I want to see them done correctly, and I don't want them to be held back by issues with backwards compatibility, older hardware, whatever it is. They've just got to figure out a way to make this sort of transition seamless and the future of games seamless as well. And I think that hopefully they'll be able to pull it off.
And getting back to our original topic, hopefully Last of Us 2 will make it to PS5.
I'm sure it will.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of talk about that, actually.
I mean, if the first game is any indication, that's absolutely going to happen here.
And I will buy it again.
I thought I read somewhere, actually, that there's a remaster that it's not even a rumor. It's just there's so many expectations of it happening because it happened with the first game. So I think naturally people are going to be hoping that we see a remaster on PS5, which is really hard to actually imagine because The Last of Us 2 looks pretty fucking tremendous.
It's gorgeous. I mean, absolutely gorgeous.
Oh, yeah.
So next question comes from Nerdy Super Bree from the Donuts family. Bree says, marry, fuck, kill, Abby, Ellie, Dina. Now, I didn't understand this at first, but after a few seconds, I was like, I understand what's going on. I'm going to answer this first because I feel like it's pretty easy. Marry Ellie, fuck Dina, kill Abby.
I
can share why after too.
I would say marry Dina because she's the only stable one out of the bunch.
Good point.
And then I guess to fuck Ellie, kill Abby.
Dave?
For me, I'm pretty sure that none of these women would be romantically interested in me at all. like Ellie is not into dudes.
That's true.
Dina is way more outgoing than I am, so I just don't think we would gel. And Abby is very serious about her physical fitness, and I'm a fucking slug pretty much. So,
oh Jesus!
I don't think there would be any kind of a love connection. And as far as killing anyone, that would just cause one of their friends to go on a 30-hour vengeance road trip, and I got my own problems.
I mean, for me, I thought that Dina was attractive because she has like this sort of outgoing personality and seems very kind of flirtatious. So that's why I said fuck Dina. For Ellie, there is something that is unusually kind of sexy about her, and I think it's because she has this kind of she's attractive, I think, and she also has this more of that sort of human nature. She has some innocence, so maybe that seems like a better situation to marry. And then Abby just seems like an absolute monster, so it just makes the most sense to end her life as quickly as possible.
Wow, dude.
Yeah.
Pux says, why do you think that they didn't call it Too Last of Us, Too Furious? Now, Pux, you got 4 thumbs down for that. For good reason, because Too Fast, Too Furious, the movie, was one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my life.
The Fast of Us?
Drew, I know you had a good one with the Cats of Us a couple weeks ago.
Oh, the Cats of Us, yeah. Because I was playing The Last of Us while my cat was laying on me or something.
Yep.
Or you could do a crossover with that show This Is Us and have This Is The Last of Us.
Oh, Jesus. That's a pretty good show. Son of a Fitch says, Drew, I've heard you say on a couple of occasions that because the story splits it off about halfway down the middle, that you would prefer it to be 2 separate campaigns. Any reasoning behind that?
Multiple reasons. First of all, the first game's length felt like the perfect length for me. And I think coming off of playing that game and finishing that game so quickly, next to this game, may have impacted that. I think if I had beaten this, the first game back in 2013 or 2014 and had some time, maybe I wouldn't have reflected on it so much. But I was really expecting like this nice, like concise narrative. And I expected it to be bigger and better, but I didn't expect it to be almost 3 times the length. And then because you have these 2 distinct stories, I kind of felt like for the longest time that if they took a Resident Evil approach to the game where you have basically a campaign A and a campaign B, like was it Chris and Jill? I think it was, Dave.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like they're both in the same story, they're in the same world, but they have their different like campaign that's happening. I thought that would have been a good way to handle this, or include Abby as DLC once you or unlock it as after you beat Ellie's campaign, so to speak. Go ahead.
I think that Naughty Dog had a mission with this narrative, and I think the only way, in my opinion, to really get those feelings across that they were trying to bring out in people was to present the game as one continuous experience.
It's hard to argue that, because now that I've finished the game, I don't think that the final battle would have had the impact if it was split across, 2 separate campaigns.
Yeah. It'd be interesting if they did a remaster and they decide to give like an option where you could play it the way you were suggesting.
Yeah, I mean, that'll probably never happen, but it would be cool.
Yeah.
But I mean, like that's how I felt while I was playing the game. I will say that my opinion has changed slightly since beating it for that, very reason. I don't think that seeing Abby, basically frail and broken, would have been as impactful. But at the same time too, like they're forcing you to kind of choose sides constantly without any choice at all. And I think that was a little frustrating too.
The last Son of Bob asks a similar question. How did you feel about the pacing of the game around the time that you thought the game was just wrapping up, but was actually only just getting started?
Yeah.
There was a moment, and not one moment either, but there were several moments where, first of all, I thought I was about to get to the ending when I was Ellie and I had returned to the theater and Abby showed up and killed Jesse. I thought, okay, this is going to be the final confrontation. It's about to end. I was extremely mistaken about that. That's when the game pivots and you spend the next like 12 hours or 15 hours playing as Abby. But then, after you get back to that point of the confrontation, and suddenly it jumps forward into the future a bit and you're on the farm with Ellie and everything is settled down. I was 100% convinced that was the end of the game. There was a point where I sat on the tractor, I was holding the baby, I was looking at the beautiful skyline, and I thought, okay, this is probably the last shot of the game. It's going to go to the credits. I was totally wrong.
Everything Dave said, I concur with. I really don't have anything to add. Like the game, so frequently, gets you to drop your guard. And just when you think it's over, there's hours upon hours upon hours more content.
And honestly, I loved that. I really did. I was delighted by it. I can see being frustrated by it, but I was just totally swept up in the world of this game, and I really didn't want it to end. I wanted the horrifying cycle of violence to end, but I was enjoying the ride.
I mean, I would just say that, for me, I think I was mentally done with the game each time that happened. And if they had ended there, I would have been fine. I continued on because I wanted to see where this went. I wanted to beat the game. And I'm glad I did. Like, I don't regret experiencing it. But I think, like, just if the game ended at those points, I would have been perfectly fine with that.
You know, I wondered about that because, like, when we got to the first point in the theater, and I thought that the game was going to conclude with that confrontation, and I totally believed that was going to be the end of the game. But then, like, you know, 17 hours later when I'm playing as Abby, I had to ask myself, like, would I really have been fulfilled? Like, if I hadn't had the opportunity to see this other side of the story, would I have really felt, you know, that this game accomplished what it was trying to do? And I guess, you know, maybe I would have, who knows? But for me, I'm glad that it went on.
Right.
Joe Donuts with the last question says, years ago, Neil Druckmann said The Last of Us 2 was about hate. He recently retracted that, saying both games were about love. But for me, The Last of Us 2 is a story about empathy. Almost immediately, I assumed they were planning to show both sides of the story. I suspected we would learn more about Abby and her crew and their justifications for killing Joel. I played as Ellie, enjoying her time with Dina, but finding that the hungrier she got for revenge, the less I wanted to be in control of her. I fought against pressing square to club Nora in the face, and I think that was intentional. I thought it was weird that the scene cut away, and we only found out that Ellie tortured Nora off-screen after the fact. Then I realized that Naughty Dog was holding back. They weren't quite ready to show me the worst of Ellie. Abby's story arc was a path of redemption where a person with a decent head on their shoulders finds no solace in revenge and ends up fighting for something more important. Her journey with Lev and Yara is full of character growth. I knew Naughty Dog wanted to change my mind about Abby, but I didn't think I'd love her by the end and hoped to play as her and Lev in The Last of Us 3. By the time I got to the theater showdown, Ellie felt like a rabid dog that needed to be put down. The way she stalked me during the fight, literally blowing my legs off with explosives in one awful game over sequence, made her truly terrifying to fight. Then I'm playing as Ellie again and she seems happy. But those old demons haunt her still, and Tommy stokes the flame. So it's time to go back on the revenge quest. At this point, I hated Ellie. I wanted to walk her straight into the ocean. But in the final awful fight sequence where I grimaced at the screen the entire time, she finally let go of the anger. The final scenes gave me room to empathize with Ellie, to see how young and broken she was. But I also finally saw hope for her. Not the best ending, but one Joel could be proud of. Well said, Joe.
I think Mr. Donuts just summarized everything we were trying to say in this podcast.
Yeah,
pretty eloquently. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't really have much to add to that. You know.
Well, you guys covered a lot of that. You know, you have very similar feelings with a lot of what Joe had to say here.
I think that, at least from my perspective, though, I was still more empathetic to Ellie than he was in some of our conversations about the game while I was playing it. He was just like, you know, fuck Ellie. I don't want to play as her. I hope she dies. And I never felt that way. I always felt sorry for her, and I always felt like frustrated that I was being forced to do these horrible things. But at the end of the day, like, Ellie's my homegirl. You know, like she's the character that I fell in love with in the first game. She's the character that I care the most about, regardless of her faults, regardless of the horrible things that she's done. Mm-hmm. And you know, very much in the same way that I cared about Joel in the first game.
How old is she supposed to be in part 2? Ellie.
Well, she was a young teenager in the first game, like 13 or 14, right, Dave?
Right.
I believe, I'm not sure, but I want to say she was 14 for some reason.
Yeah. I think she's like in her early 20s.
Okay.
19, 20, 21, somewhere around there.
Because I think they say, don't they say the game is like 4 years later? Am I right about that?
You might be. So maybe she's younger than that. Then maybe she's more like 18.
So she's somewhere in there.
It's so the game takes place 5 years after the events of the first game and 25 years after the outbreak. Ellie, who is now 19 years old, returns as the main protagonist. So that's from thelastofus.fandom.com.
All right, then.
So,
You know, one point I really got a kick out of was when Ellie and Dina and Jesse wind up outside of a like basically like the equivalent of a Comic-Con. And you know, and there's these banners for the convention hanging up, and they kind of take a moment and they wonder like what it would have been like if had they lived in a different time when people could actually go and do something as you know, as lighthearted as that. And it does make you wonder what Ellie's life would have been like had she not been born in this horrifying world.
Yeah, it's a good point. You know, like there's a lot of innocence that you see from her in the first game, and you know, most of that innocence is largely gone in this game. You know, except for the flashback sequences and the occasional moments where, you know, she's collecting those cards for that superhero game, or, you know,
and I thought it was so cool that you get to see her diary as the game progresses.
I enjoyed that too. Yeah. And the drawings and like, even like in the flash forward sections, you could kind of go backwards a couple pages sometimes, which is pretty neat.
Yep. I made sure to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So let's try something new here, Drew. Sorry, go ahead, Dave.
Nope, go for it.
You sure?
I'm positive.
Okay. Why don't we do a closing statement from each one of you, 1 minute apiece, and I've got a little timer here on my phone.
Ooh, okay.
So let's try this. So 1 minute, and it could be a recommendation, it could be what you didn't like, just kind of a 1 minute consensus of this game for the fans out there. So who wants to go first?
I'll go.
Okay.
You know, I'll go. Okay. I'll go first.
Okay, Drew. Okay, you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, starting now.
Absolutely worth playing, but you need to expect that you are going to be depressed for the 40 hours the game lasts. Probably more like 30 hours if you don't take the time to check every single nook and cranny like I did. Also, Abby sucks, and she should have died originally, but I ended up liking her at the end. But I still prefer Ellie, and she's great, and my cat is meowing at me for some reason.
You got 30 more seconds if you want to add anything else.
30? Oh, shit.
30 seconds.
But yeah, I mean, like, it's undoubtedly my game of the year. This is a game that I think defines the generation, you know, the PS4 generation. It defines the system in ways that we didn't realize were possible. And it takes storytelling to another level, one that even compared to the first game, I didn't think was possible. I thought the Last of Us 1 was a pinnacle of video game storytelling, and this blows it away.
Nice job. You were 2 seconds over.
Cool.
All right, Dave.
My cat is still yelling at me, by the way.
Dave, you ready for this?
Let's do this thing.
Okay, and go.
The Last of Us 1 is one of my favorite games of all time. I absolutely loved it, and as soon as Joel died in part 2, I thought there was no way that this game could even come close to that experience. But I'll tell you, over its 30-plus hour length, it crawled and scratched its way into that spot. The Last of Us 2 is a fucking masterpiece, in my humble opinion. It is hard to play. It is sometimes scary, sometimes visceral, sometimes depressing. But the fact that it makes you feel all of those things... It is a transcendent experience, and like Drew said, I think it is a defining moment of this generation. It is my game of the year for sure, and I think anyone out there who isn't sure they want to play it, I say give it a chance, because this game has a lot to tell you.
Very nice. Just 5 seconds shy of 60 seconds there. Or
nice.
Yeah. So, good job.
Woo.
Woo. That was enthusiastic, man.
It was.
Awesome.
Well. That was exhausting.
Yeah. Just like the game.
Oh, man. I feel like I just like had a therapist session, and I feel like I still have to like come back tomorrow.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, I think you said it best. Well, both of you guys really said it best. This game has a huge amount to unpack, and I feel like there's more that we could have spoken about, and maybe we'll do a part 2, but I think that's a really good good review for the fans out there that have played and haven't. And maybe don't care about spoilers.
I mean, we could dive into like basically every single cutscene that happens and, you know, talk about what those mean to the characters, because there isn't anything wasted. Like every single thing that happens, even when it seems like it's like a little bit long, like, or I could do without some of the gameplay sections, but the story, the cutscenes, none of that stuff is wasted. You know?
And I got to tell you, I love the fact that you have the option to restart a cutscene, because there would be times where I would like miss something, and it was just really cool that I got to not miss it.
Like just go back and rewatch it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's true.
And I got to say,
very
like,
whole, complete game.
Yeah. And like another thing we could have dived into, I think the most effective quote unquote character of both of these games is the environment that you are in. There is so much atmosphere and detail in every single inch of this game world that I think that is as great an achievement as anything that they did with the story.
That's a good point. It's a good point. You know, and just like thinking about the different environments that you're in, you know, whether it's the aquarium or Jackson or, you know, the stadium for the WLF or the Seraphites Island or any
for me,
of that
man,
stuff.
it was just the
hospital,
the towns, you know, the little shops that you could go into. Like each one was crafted with so much care and personality. Like you could tell a story just by looking around in any of those places.
Yeah, like I was thinking about like was it Little China? There's like that street or two where you're like there's all these Chinese shops.
Yep.
And you're piecing together what happened there just based on notes.
Mm-hmm.
I could go another hour.
Oh, and I'm sorry, I totally could. I love the fact that since the outbreak 25 years ago kind of happened in the fall, like there's kind of a perpetual sense of like Halloweeniness to certain locations where there's like decorations that have been left up for 25 years. Mm-hmm. It just adds like depth to it.
100% agree.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, we could keep going on, but we got to wrap it up. We're 2 hours in now.
I don't think I can feel my butt anymore.
Oh man, my
like
butt vanished a long time ago.
Yeah, some people would pay good money for that, Dave.
Yeah. Well, this is the key,
butt.
man. Slug butt.
Because I'm a slug.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Love it, man. Well, what do you say, Drew?
Yeah, wrap it up. Take us home.
Okay, folks, thank you for tuning in. Again, you can check us out at WDGR Podcast, all things podcasty, our website, WDGRPodcast.com, our Discord, YouTube, pretty much everything, Spotify, Stitcher, iTunes, you name it, we're everywhere. So give us a shout, give us a listen, and we will catch you next time.
Later.
Later.
What are you eating, Will?
Hang on.
He has to prepare this. Okay.
I do.
Are you taking a photo? Of course you are.
No, I'm not. I'm actually not. It's veggie and flaxseed corn tortilla chips with spinach and artichoke hummus.
Oh, that's disgusting.
Oh my, Drew, I'm going to lose my fucking mind, dude. I'm going to lose my fucking mind. Dave, you are required to do two things right now. One, you need to apologize sincerely. And two, you need to tell me that, that I am the healthiest person that you know. Sincerely.
Okay.
Those two things you must do.
Oh my God.
For starters, Will, I deeply apologize for my comment about your snack choices. All right.
Apology accepted.
As far as your second request, I would love to say that, but I know a man named Brian.
Oh God, Brian.
And he is certainly the healthiest person I know.
And why is this?
Multiple reasons.
Yeah. But if it wasn't for Brian, it would be Mike Tubiak.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fair.
Mike's got you beat too, but
I'm still fucking healthy though, so fuck y'all.